that it's hard to find a good HVAC, people. I think that the challenge is that there's really great installers out there and there's really great designers out there, and often they're not the same people. And that's the challenge.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, a regular discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. I'm Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Brian Pontalillo, FHB Editor.
Hey, Patrick.
Nice to see you, Brian. Kiley Jacques, GBA Editor.
Hello.
And producer Jeff Rose.
Howdy.
You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com. Please email your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And thanks for being here, guys.
It's nice to see your faces.
Likewise. What have you been doing, Kiley? I haven't talked to you in a while.
Yeah. Well, actually, I wanted to solicit some opinions on a house that I've been watching unfold very slowly for almost 3 years now. I take regular hikes at a conservation area, and this house is this energy hog on the hill. But it seems to be at a standstill. It's been going up so slowly and it's enormous. I sent a photo of it to you guys because it just fascinates me on 100 different levels.
It needs more hips on the roof.
Right. Well, it kind of put me in mind of that double-hipped roof that we were talking about recently from another listener. But I just wanted to get I look at that thing. First, it's encroaching on conservation land. I mean, it's just it's an eyesore in a sense. So I decided to lumber on over to it yesterday it was, and take a pretty good look from afar because it's all fenced off, but it's enormous. I would guess it's at least 5,000 square feet, right? And it couldn't get another dormer on that roof if they tried, right? However, and it's, the complicated form makes it clearly, I mean, to me, it strikes me as it's not an energy efficient house by any stretch of the imagination, right? And a complicated build. But I have to admit, all that said, there's something about it that I love. And so I wanted to see what you guys thought of it, because it's a monster and it's a complex build. And there's things about it.
Did you see that on the Slack message, Brian? Do you know what she's talking about?
Yeah, I just took a look at it.
What do you think?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to cast judgment without knowing, too much about what's going on in there. It's so interesting to me, this fascination with these complex roofs and how that came about and where that came from whenever it started in the 80s and early 90s, I guess, and it got worse in the early 2000s with the building boom. I wonder if it's because with trusses and with truss design and the efficiency and affordability of trusses, I wonder if it was like an affordable way for architects to add quote unquote character to a house by adding like these complex roof lines that are large. Often those spaces they're just attic spaces, right?
Or nothing. They're just completely inaccessible.
Right. Or nothing. Yeah. Unaccessible. Yeah, because they're truss roofs. And so I don't know the evolution of that. I don't know where that came about. I know that Marianne Cusato has interesting opinions on what it does to us as we look at houses and how it brings our eyes up and away from the house and street level and all that. And it's really interesting to hear her speak about it. The other thing that struck me about the photo, of course, I mean, the house was, I wanted to be able to spin it around and see those roof lines more, because it also looked like it had really, not only did it have all those hips that are so common and that kind of stuff on these projects, but it also looked like it had a couple of gables that might have made for some really poor water management issues, but I couldn't tell if there was separation between them. So I won't go there. But I did notice a giant pile of debris in front of it. And if that's construction debris,
it is.
And that's really problematic too.
Totally. It seems like a project that's been abandoned. It hasn't been worked on in some time. So I don't know what the status of it is. But one thing that I love about it is that front portico. I just think that's gorgeous. So that house has a lot going on, and I'm very anxious to see it at its completion point. but I had to share it with you guys as I was hiking. I was like, I just wonder what these guys would think, and listeners too, if they take a look at the photo. I welcome feedback, because it's not a straight up, boy, that's a monster and should never have happened. There's some things, it has some redeeming qualities. But
what do you think about it, Jeff?
I haven't seen it. So
I feel like Kiley and Brian, it's got some redeeming qualities. It's not butt ugly,
Right.
which, the complexity of the roof always baffles me. Like, and especially in a snowy climate, what the heck are you thinking? It's like, ask Jeff about bad roof lines, right, Jeff?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because Patrick stopped by last week and was able to see the back of my house where I've got basically two shed dormers with a doghouse dormer stuck in between them. So all that water just funnels down into like little 18-inch wide spots, and it just ice dam city.
Yeah.
Martin Holiday
that's what
wrote,
I
I
see.
think, 2 really good articles on roof design, and and they're both on GBA. I think he wrote one a while back, and I think he wrote one more recently. And most people wouldn't accept a house that Martin
was a
would
straight
design.
gable.
If you use all Martin's rules for designing a house, most people would think that house is pretty boring. But that's not the point of what he writes about. The point is, about building smart, and so you take those lessons and apply them. And if anyone listening is unfamiliar with roof design and the problems that arise from more complex roof designs, I would recommend seeking out Martin's blogs. And not only is Martin really smart, but he also worked as a roofer for a while, and so he's seen a lot of damage that can happen from overly complex or downright poorly designed roofs. So I would check out those blogs if you're interested in more on that topic.
What is the joke that, when you ask a child to draw a roof, they draw, or a house, they draw this like simple triangular shape, right? And when you ask an architect how to design a roof, they take a piece of paper and they crumple it up like this, they open it up again, and then they got their roof. I think that's unfair, but
perfect.
sometimes you wonder, right?
I love it.
It seems like a new thing. I mean, like, there are, of course, Victorian homes that have very complicated roofs, but they aren't the things that we have now, I would argue.
Right.
And the part I really don't get is, so you often see these eyebrow dormers or doghouse dormers on these very elaborate roofs, and they aren't anything. They don't. They're just to make it look like something. Those spaces are inaccessible.
Right. And so you've added a weak link to your roof design for no reason.
Yeah.
Other than adding a little bit of style to the house. And I would argue that there's better ways
to do that. Yeah.
Don't design a roof that needs added character. Don't design a house that needs the roof to add character to it. If you have a cape that has bedrooms upstairs underneath the roof line, and that's the house you have, and it makes great sense to add dormers to that cape. You're making that space better. But there's a good reason to do that.
You're right.
And that's not easily done well, right? Weatherproofing, insulating, air sealing, a simple cape is challenging enough to get right.
And siding dormers and flashing dormers and like this, all this stuff costs a lot of money, right?
Yes.
It's like, that is not fast, and you can get it wrong.
Yeah.
So I don't want to talk too much about it because we've been talking a lot already, but I did some very ordinary suburban dad type projects this weekend, and that was super great. Like cleaning the gutters, like dealing with the leaves. It was great. I was
probably seemed like a snap after everything that you've been up to.
Oh, it was way more appealing than like
painting,
turning off my plumbing for hours on end, and
Patrick, do you have a leaf blower?
I do.
Do you use it to clean your gutters?
Never.
No.
By the time I get to it, Brian, there's usually like an inch thick mat of semi-rotted leaves, and you really gotta pull it out of there by hand.
Yeah.
And at my house, I would have never thought I was a ranch home kind of guy. I'm just, I like more visual interest than a little rectangular box affords, but there's a lot to like about maintaining a ranch house with a single level. My 16-foot extension ladder reaches every part of it, the gutter. It's just really nice. And as
Yeah.
you get older, that's something you got to think about more, right? Who wants to be like climbing up on a ladder when they're 70, like pulling leaves out of the gutter? And good luck
Hey,
finding
just a-
someone to do that.
Hey, you guys, just quickly, I spent $150 to have my chimney cleaned and realized after they were here for probably less than 15 minutes, I have got to get over my fear of ladders because I could have done that job. I watched what they did. I could do that. You just need a bristle brush and some gumption to get up there and do it.
Well, you can buy the bristle brush.
Yeah, I know.
You can't get gumption for any price.
I got to get over the ladder thing. Jeez. Anyway.
All I would say,
that's
Kiley,
done.
is the only way to get over that is to just do it. And I
I
remember
know,
being
I
very
know.
fearful, when I was a young carpenter of many setups, and you just learn to deal with it.
I know. You're right.
Yeah, and I think, hey, being a little bit scared on a ladder is a good thing.
A good thing.
Because I
Right.
have definitely, when I have been doing work that has had me up and down ladders a lot, or on pump jacks a lot, or anything off the ground, I definitely find myself getting too comfortable after a while. After you're doing that kind of work for days or weeks, and all of a sudden you're like, pushing the ladder off the wall to move your hose underneath the legs, and you realize, like, a healthy fear here would be a good thing.
I totally agree about that. You got to really be able to trust your gear too. Like, it's definitely not worth skimping on a scaffold or a ladder setup, right? You got to have the right equipment, and it's got to be set up properly because the stakes are high, as we always
I've got
say.
Brian's old ladder. I've got your ladder,
Yeah,
Brian.
and I really like the what the name for it is, the feet for the tops of ladders that spread the
I think
ladder.
they call it a stabilizer.
Stabilizer. I think they're dynamite, and have always felt much more comfortable on ladders when I have those, and find that they put you at a nice distance from the wall for work.
Mm.
I have never used one of those.
Well, you don't need one right now with your 16-foot eaves.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Doesn't it make it really heavy to stand up the ladder? Isn't that a downside?
Well, tall ladders are obnoxiously heavy anyway,
Yes, they
in my
are.
opinion.
True.
I have a great tip for moving tall ladders. It would probably be better demonstrated than discussed. But I was working for a guy one time, and I was struggling to lift to get a tall ladder up, and he just showed me this way to pick the ladder up. Basically, the idea is to hold the rungs as far apart as you can.
Mhm.
So to reach one arm up, grab the rung the tallest rung you can reach, and reach the other hand down and grab the furthest one away from the one that you have with the lifted hand. And it's just this great way to ease lifting a heavy ladder when it's vertical.
That makes
It
perfect
sounds
sense.
like a great way to get a back injury, but maybe I'm wrong about that.
No, because you're using the strength of your entire torso.
Well, and
That's
the way you're spreading the grip, I think you're just stabilizing it, because they're tall, and that's why they're unwieldy.
Yeah, totally. Putting up like 40-foot ladders and 36-foot ladders is one of the hardest things physically I think you can do by yourself, right?
This was also the guy who taught me how to use a steel rake properly. And when he started to tell me how to use a steel rake properly, I almost blew my lid. It was one of those moments where, like, you feel like this guy's just telling you stuff that you, like, who can teach me how to use a steel rake? Come on. And next thing I knew, like, after he walked away and I immediately huffed and puffed and went back to doing it my way, when he wasn't looking, I started trying using it his way. And I realized, damn, this is good. there is a right way to use a steel rake.
Yeah, especially when you're young. You don't want anyone to tell you anything. And,
Right.
Hi, folks. I'm a new listener, and I'm having a little trouble submitting listener feedback. Maybe this is because I'm not yet a subscriber, but I will be, I soon I suspect. Now, well, I'm going to start right there. This comes from Bucky. Bucky, you can always leave feedback, whether you're a web member or a subscriber or not. So fhbpodcast@taunton.com, and you can always email that inbox at any time, and a bunch of people get it. So feedback is welcome and appreciated. Also, for some reason, the listener questionnaire wouldn't load past the second question for me. So we have to talk to Rob Wadsack about that. He's talking about our podcast listener questionnaire that's on the website. Long story short, I'm a small one-man boutique lumber producer, Resource Wood Inc., dedicated to urban or community lumber, that is, salvaging logs for lumber that big mills don't want or overlook. I've also gotten into building masonry heaters and pizza ovens as a good use of fuel-grade wood that can't be made into lumber. The Masonry Heater Association of North America is a great organization that meets once a year here in Western North Carolina in April for one of the best building science conferences anywhere in the world. The latest FHB podcast discussed, in a nutshell, thermal comfort in a house as it relates to convection and radiant heat. The presenters should familiarize themselves with the Raber-Hutchinson comfort equation. From greenstoneheat.com, the Raber-Hutchinson comfort equation theorizes temperature of ambient air plus the mean radiant temperature of surrounding surfaces will equal 140 degrees Fahrenheit. In other words, if the MRT is 70, the air temperature must also be 70 to maintain comfortable conditions. And for every degree in MRT, the room air temperature must increase by 1 degree to maintain comfort for the people in the room. This also explains why you can be comfortable in your home in the summertime wearing a t-shirt with 68-degree air temperature, while in the winter time you can be cold in the same room with 70-degree air temperature while wearing a sweater. The radiant energy of the sun is stronger in the summer, which raises the MRT for all the solids that make up your home. Similarly, a masonry heater directs heat to the solids, including people, increasing the MRT in your home, allowing you to be comfortable at lower ambient air temperatures. Since convective heating devices do little to raise the temperature of solids in the room, the air temperature must be higher to keep its inhabitants comfortable. I think that the Raber-Hutchinson succinctly expresses what the podcast hosts were driving at. Please share my contact information with any of your people if I can help you in these areas. Bucky Black, Boone, North Carolina. And Bucky included a phone number. I'm not going to read that during our recording, but if you all want to get in touch with Bucky about some salvaged lumber, email the podcast and we'll put you in touch.
That's pretty cool gig that he has.
Have you guys heard of this?
Wait,
I've heard of this as a topic. I don't know that I've heard that term that he used, or maybe I did, but didn't store it. But yeah, I have heard of that as a topic, and I recently, I guess it was earlier this year, I did a bunch of research on windows, and this what he's saying kind of really relates to what I heard from a lot of the experts that I talked to about the importance of high performance windows in your home, and how what's less important is the efficiency of the window for the energy efficiency of your home, and what's more important is the efficiency of the window for your comfort. And the same type of thing. It's about that temperature, the surface temperature, right? Your house can be the air in your house can be a comfortable temperature for you, and you walk near the window and all of a sudden, a poor window, you walk near it and all of a sudden you feel cold. And it's not because the air temperature there is any different. It's because that surface temperature, the window is so cold, you start to lose your heat to it. And so
the comfort of a window, Brian, is it measured in U factor, or is there some other measurement that attributes the comfort quality of a window versus its thermal performance?
Well, I spoke at length about this with if I try to say his last name, I'm going to butcher it, but his first name is Enrico. I think his last name might be Bulanari, and he's from Emu Passive, and he's going to actually do a webinar for us this winter on choosing windows. And he showed me how important that surface temperature is. Largely, the performance data that you need to arrive at the surface temperature is the U factor, or the solar heat gain coefficient. And in his view, there are times when it's worth calculating that surface temperature of the window as a comfort consideration. He and also Emily Mottram also both said, like, that's why they care about air leakage in their windows. Emily said to me specifically, like, I've hit passive house standards of airtightness with double hung windows that are known to be the leakier of windows, but that's what the homeowners wanted. Other air sealing details are much more important. But the reason I still would push people towards tighter windows is about their comfort. I can hit the same levels of airtightness in the house with leakier windows, but I want them to be comfortable when they're around their windows.
Do some manufacturers include like a comfort rating on their products, or is that left up to the specifier to figure out?
I think it's left up to the specifier. I've never seen a comfort rating. You see U factor, solar heat gain coefficient, visual light transmittance. Yeah.
That would be a hard thing to
condensation rating, but I've never seen anything that has directly related to comfort.
I'm sorry, Kiley, I didn't hear what you said.
Oh, just that would be that's so subjective. That would be a hard thing to quantify.
The comfort of a window. Yeah, I'm sure you're right.
Unless they gave you like surface temperature at such and such interior and exterior degrees.
That's true.
That would be telling.
Mm-hmm.
But again, that's going to apply largely to, the U factor is going to drive that in a lot of ways.
How many boutique lumber producers do you guys know? I thought this guy's job was pretty cool.
I think there's a lot of them. You just don't know them because they're so regional.
Yeah.
They're very small businesses. They're a person or two with a chainsaw and a truck and maybe some equipment to move the logs. And I've heard of this being common in California where, if you cut down a tree in some parts of California, you have to replace it, or, it's there's value in salvaging the urban logs.
Totally.
Yeah, and we think of logging as like a huge industry, and it is in a lot of ways. But there's also a lot of small time loggers out there. I worked for a winter with a guy in Iowa, and he makes his living harvesting a couple trees a day that he just buys from farmers.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
That seems like a hard way to make a living, man.
It's rough work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when things go wrong, they go really wrong. This comes from Matt. You guys are going to get a kick out of this. We have all kinds of people listen to this show. I appreciate all the insight and intellectual discussion you share with us viewers. Catching up on past episodes has made my daily commute much more enjoyable. My lengthy response is directed towards Patrick's generator oil question in episode 281. As a research and development chemist at a small refiner/lubricant manufacturer in northwestern Pennsylvania, I believe I can offer some insight into the which oil brand should I use topic that was discussed. So Brian, you don't know anything about this, but I bought this generator, and in the owner's manual, it tells me to use this version of Yamaha motor oil in it. And my question was, do I have to use that? It's a pain to get. And he's answering, and no one, obviously, that we work with knew this question. He says Colin was correct in his assessment that Yamaha does not have a special patent on the oil prescribed in your generator's owner's manual. Using a different brand oil will not be problematic as long as the chosen oil meets the specified API service category. However, this is where small engines don't get no respect. The current API category, updated in May of 2020, is SP. This particular update primarily addressed low-speed pre-ignition, fuel economy, and timing chain wear by shifting detergent packages from calcium-based to magnesium-based and organic friction modifiers to molybdenum-specific inorganic modifiers, none of which is of high importance to a generator or other small engine equipment. For this reason, I steered towards Japanese automotive standards organization that is aimed toward motorcycle and scooter small engines. These lubricants are often referenced for use with generators and small power equipment, as the operation parameters align more closely than they do with those of cars and trucks. While still produced with high-performance additives and base oils, JASO categorized oil, or specifically marketed small engine oil, may be more affordable because they do not contain the expensive chemistries earlier mentioned and are cross-compatible with previous API categories. Matt also mentioned ethanol free gas. I recommend this in all small engines, especially in a generator that may sit idle for long periods. Ethanol is hygroscopic and can absorb enough water to rust critical engine components over time. If the generator is stored in a garage attached to a leaky house or in a frequently used workshop, I advise using high-octane pre-canned fuel. Although costly, it has virtually no detectable amounts of benzene. In fact, some brands of pre-canned fuel is straight alkylate product that is low in concentration of additional respiratory irritants such as toluene, ethylbenzene, and xylene. Hope this information helps and keep up the great work, Matt. That was fantastic.
So what are you going to buy? How did this information affect your purchasing habits?
So I went to, I was antsy and I went to Napa and I bought the 1040 or whatever they said that had this API service rating. And I hope it's going to be okay. This thing is worth more than my cars are presently, so I want it to last a while. So there you go, Brian. You got to use these motorcycle oils in your motorcycle, right?
I guess so.
But you're going to want those molybdenum modifiers, though, not.
Don't forget that.
So when I stopped by Jeff's house last week to give him this interior door I no longer needed, and he's out there. I'm futzing with a 2-stroke engine, and I just had to laugh to myself. I was like, how much time do people spend futzing with those things versus like actually using them?
What was the engine attached to?
Right.
It's backpack blower.
Kylie's a big fan for so many reasons.
They tend to run. My experience with those engines is that they tend to run like they run like a top for a little while, and then they're nothing but problems. There's like a day. There's like a day when it turns.
Yeah.
I don't know. I had a scooter.
I've never been one for engine maintenance. Very skilled at engine maintenance. So what do I know?
Kylie, was your scooter 2-stroke or 4-stroke?
Well, I'm trying to remember now. It was so long ago.
I'm betting it was 4-stroke.
Probably 4-stroke. I guess you're right. Yeah, I was a scooter, Vespa. Anyway, I remember buying oil, not knowing what the heck I was getting.
Did you like having that vehicle? Did you find it scary in Seattle?
Yeah, it was scary because it's wet there. It was scary, but I didn't want to have a car. It's cheap. I liked filling up the tank.
And you can park it anywhere,
Everywhere,
which is handy, right?
Yeah, they make a lot of sense in some ways, but they're not the safest. That's true. But every time I hear people talking about, small engines and oil, I think of my little scooter.
And you have you've completely abandoned the small engines, though, right? Your lawnmower is now electric.
That's right.
Do you have any gas engine stuff besides your car?
I don't.
That's cool. Well, let's get to some questions before we run out of time. This comes from Andrew. FHP podcast, I'm looking for your opinions on my laundry room flooring. My house was built in 1977 and the laundry room has a smelly indoor-outdoor carpet on the floor. A container of bleach recently fell, which only served to change the smells. I decided to rip up the carpet and tile the floor, which has been on my to-do list for a while. I removed the rubber baseboard, which always makes me think of commercial buildings, and started to pull back the carpet. It was glued down, as I discovered, sheet linoleum. I decided to have a sample tested, and you guessed it, the linoleum is 30% chrysotile. Is that right? Chrysotile?
Chrysotile, yeah.
Anyway, asbestos. The carpet mastic is non-asbestos, and the adhesive holding the linoleum down was inconclusive, although it didn't appear to be the black asbestos mastic of yesteryear. The laundry room is small, about 30 square feet, so costs for a professional asbestos removal are prohibitive. Estimates range from $800 to $1,000. I'm not sure how intact the linoleum is under the carpet. Presumably there might be some wear and tear if they decided to carpet over it. What options do I have to change the flooring? If I suck it up and pay big bucks to have it professionally removed, can I tile it like I wanted? But I'm trying to understand other options. Can I put plywood over the carpet and put vinyl plank flooring? Maybe glue the planks down to the plywood subfloor so I don't have to worry about them coming apart when I move the washing machine and dryer? Could I put cement board down and tile that? Would the cement board need to be screwed down? And if so, I guess I'd hit the floor joist so I'm not releasing asbestos dust into the air in the basement. If I pull up the carpet, I'll have the carpet mastic all over the linoleum, which seems like a pain to clean. But if the carpet stays, presumably, some of the smell stays too. I'm just trying to understand my options in here before dropping big money on professional abatement. Thanks, and I love the podcast. You all bring your own expertise, and it seems like you genuinely enjoy each other's company. Thanks, Buzz. That's nice.
He's got to get that carpet out of there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't put anything over it, right?
No.
It's not rigid enough.
Right.
And I don't, frankly, think $800 or $1,000 is a lot of money to ask to have someone pill that up and deal with it professionally. What do you guys think about that?
I thought the same thing. I would pay for it. I would want that done right, and I would pay for it. But that's me.
Brian's not sure.
No, I agree with that assessment. For under $1,000 or under, I think, have this done professionally, have that done professionally. And then, from there, whatever you want to do with flooring is possible, makes anything you want to do possible. And it makes what you want to do not only possible, but you can now do it right.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I my mind went round and round on this. I wondered, is there a way to safely remove this on your own if you just took up all this, took it up the whole floor from subflooring and all, and kind of as
one big
in as few pieces as possible, like make strategic cuts and then just pry up subfloor. You get down to the floor framing and then put down new subfloor. So my mind went through that. I thought of building a floor. I didn't think it was a good idea to put a sheet good over the carpet, but then I thought, could you build a floor over this floor, just put down sleepers and do it that way? Like if you had the head height and if the step down or up wasn't going to be a problem. I went through it all, but for the cost of under $1,000, I'd say just get the asbestos removed professionally and build a nice floor that you want.
Yeah.
I think so too. I mean, I don't think it's outside. I think there are some people who could do this safely and protect their family, but if you get it wrong, you have such a bigger problem than if you just paid the $1,000 and had someone deal with this, right? Who's trained and knows how to dispose of it, and will just keep the fibers from spreading throughout the house. I just don't think it's worth messing around with. When we were building houses in Pittsburgh, when I was building houses in Pittsburgh for Habitat for Humanity, asbestos-covered pipes were always, around. And that was one thing we definitely paid to have dealt with, because you can't be making a mess with asbestos and then have people in there later, either volunteers or homeowners. It's just not worth it.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's sage advice.
I hate to tell people to not take things on themselves, but I think, lead and asbestos abatement is definitely not something to screw around with.
Yeah. When you think about the total cost of 30 square feet of flooring, and, if you need to find some ways for your new floor to be a little less expensive.
Yeah. Right.
Because you
Save
can
on
do
that
that
side.
too, use a little bit more affordable tile.
Yep.
Totally agree. This comes from Craig. Hello, Fine Homebuilding podcast. I have a house built in the 1860s with aluminum siding that's over black tar-like blocks and then the old wood siding. I would like to tear it off and put 1 inch of foam board with an R5 and then 1/2 inch plywood with vinyl siding. What is the best way to do this? Put the foam on the studs and then the plywood so it will make a thermal barrier, and nail the siding to the plywood, or put the plywood first, then the foam board? I'm sending a picture of our room addition. It's the wife's sewing/quilting room. All I have left to do is to side it. The rest is done. Thanks for any help, Craig. Did you guys see this nice room that he built? It's beautiful.
I didn't get to see the photo, no. Or didn't see it. No.
It's on Squad in Slack, Kiley, if you want to take a peeky.
Okay.
What do you think, Brian?
Well, so you can nail vinyl siding through 1 inch of rigid foam. And most people will argue that the best place for the rigid foam is outside of the sheathing. So
keep the sheathing warm, right? If we keep the sheathing and the framing warm, there's less chance of them becoming condensing surfaces and rotting stuff.
Yes. And now he didn't say where he was, so we don't know if R5 is enough to keep it, warm. But that generally, yes, is the idea that you put all your framing inside that exterior insulation. It keeps it warm, makes for a more durable wall. So that's sort of the preferred way for most people when it comes to the building science of the wall. Some people like to have that nail base on the outside of the wall. He didn't say whether his wall has sheathing and what kind of sheathing that is. But he did say put the foam over the studs, which made me think he didn't have sheathing on his walls. So
my experience with this product that I think he's describing, which we've been calling Celotex, which is a fiber asphalt impregnated sheathing material, and these ones have what amount to asphalt shingle granules on them that are molded to look like, they're supposed to look like block or brick, but it's not fooling anyone, right? But they don't have sheathing. That is the sheathing layer most typically, in my experience.
Yeah. So some, I was going to say, some people like that. They want that the nailer on the outside, and that's what Zip R sheathing's all about. Right.
So that's polyiso bonded to a sheathing panel, and the sheathing panel has a WRB on it. And unlike most of the exterior foam installations, this one puts the OSB on the outside, so it's more easier to attach siding conventionally and fasten windows and build the way people are used to building who use only panel sheathing.
Yeah. So that's an option if he wants, and I think they have an R6 product or 6.6 maybe. But so that's an option if he really does want the sheathing on the outside for nailing reasons. And it makes, it uncomplicates, some trim details and whatnot that can get complicated, flashing details that can get complicated when you have rigid foam on the outside.
I like that product. I've built houses with foam on the exterior, and I find window installation and siding installation can be a pain. It makes it harder. And vinyl siding manufacturers say you're not supposed to use strapping with a foam layer or with vinyl siding at all. But I have done that too.
What's the reason for that? Why shouldn't you?
I think it reduces its wind resistance, Kiley. I think when it's tight to the sheathing layer, it seems to hold up better in wind.
That makes sense.
Because if you don't have it fully sheathed behind it, it can, kind of flex in the wind and come unhooked, and then it can blow off.
I don't think though that you need with one. I'm pretty sure with 1 inch of foam, most manufacturers allow you to nail through the foam without furring. You have to make sure that your foam is fastened properly, because often furring strips, one of the benefits of furring strips is that they're holding the foam to the wall.
Right.
So as long as you can get the foam on the wall until you install your furring strips, that's your real method of attachment. So you have to use some adequate cap screws or whatever to install the foam. But
Brian, what do you and other folks in the GBA universe, and I'll ask Kiley the same question, like, what do they say about a WRB when you're putting a foam outsulation layer? Is that the WRB, or do you put a secondary one on there?
Foam, you can use some rigid foam as a WRB, and some of it qualifies, in the ICCES, is the evaluation service for the International Code Council, and they approve WRBs. So IRC language is quote unquote approved WRBs that you must have, and so they do approve certain foam products as WRBs, and therefore you can use them. Foil faced rigid foam, for example, many of those products can be used as the WRB. The decision where your WRB goes, so whether it can be the foam or not is mostly about how you're going to install your windows. So if you're going to install your windows flush with the sheathing and then have extension jambs to bring the window trim out to the plane of the foam, then your WRB needs to be back behind the foam as well. If you're going to fur your windows out to the plane of the rigid foam or continuous insulation, whatever you're using, because I think wood fiber can be used as a WRB as well, but so out to the level of your continuous insulation, then that's where your WRB needs to be out in plane with the windows. So where you put that is more a matter of how you choose to install your windows than there being one way that is dependent on the fact that you have continuous exterior insulation.
Brian,
Go ahead, Kiley.
Do you get into that with the piece that you did of 5 walls that work? Do you get into the window installation aspect of it? I can't remember.
I don't think I did.
Yeah.
But there's plenty. I think, again, Martin, has a article on GBA called Where Does the WRB Go? And it directly gets at just that question.
You provided an excellent answer to a question I didn't ask, Brian. I was more interested in, like, do good builders think taping foam is a good WRB, or do they say to put something over it? I don't want to say that it's bad practice and that you're a bad builder if you use the rigid foam as a WRB. However, what we mostly see is not the continuous foam being used as a WRB. Most builders are using other products as another product as their WRB. I've never gotten anything to stick to XPS foam, like tape wise, ever. I just, like, it doesn't seem to stick.
Yeah, the one tape that I think works pretty well is the 3M
8067, I think it is.
Yeah, I've used that and it's worked, and I've heard other people say that's what they use with XPS, but don't use XPS anyway, because that's terrible foam.
Yeah.
Because of its global warming potential.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't use that. That's
There's
a
an
good.
interesting new just to throw this out there for people to look at. There's a new interesting product from the same company that makes the Thermalbuck product. So the Thermalbuck product, if you don't know that, it's a window extension for this reason, right? For pulling your windows out to the plane of rigid foam. That company has now introduced a rigid foam product, which is a GPS product. So that's graphite impregnated
EPS.
extruded polystyrene. Yeah. And I'm sorry, expanded polystyrene. And they have applied a WRB to the surface of the foam. And they even have a system of lapping so that you have the WRB extends on two sides, right? A horizontal and a vertical leg of the sheets extends beyond the sheet of the foam, so that as you install this, now you lap your WRB onto the sheets below and the sheets to one side.
That's an interesting product. Go ahead, Kiley.
Well, I was going to ask you what it's called so people can look it up.
Let me look it up. Talk amongst yourselves.
My first question was like, well, okay, that's fine as a WRB, but it's not an air sealing layer, right? I mean, it was just like seemed there was like too much seam to be, a real airtight assembly. But maybe I'm wrong about that.
So it's first of all, it's called Thermaltight, and you can find it on that. If you can go to the Thermalbuck website, and there's a tab for it. And I think you're right, Patrick. I mean, most builders are not using taped rigid foam for an air sealing layer. Some do, and it's certainly going to add some air tightness, but most exterior air sealing is happening at the sheathing now.
Yeah,
that's
it seems so much easier
too. Yeah.
This comes from Matt in Chagrin Falls, Ohio. Hi, FHB crew. Since the pandemic began, I've been slowly applying the knowledge I've acquired listening to your podcast and reading Fine Homebuilding to re-insulate and improve a semi-finished basement area in our 1979 ranch home. After removing the old drop ceiling panels, which doubled as the flooring for a mouse version of Studio 54, and sealing all exterior gaps and leaks around the mud sill, I'd now like to install some much-needed soundproofing, mineral wool, and drywall to the ceiling. Before doing so, however, I wonder if I should first address the presence of panned air duct returns between the floor joists while I have the opportunity. I've listened to your podcast long enough to appreciate that these returns aren't the most efficient way to seal a duct, especially when I can see that coaxial cable has been fished through them, and can hardly stomach the thought of what my family has been breathing in for the last decade. After combing through some of FHB's archived materials and podcasts, it's unclear to me whether a DIY-friendly alternative to panned returns exists, or if my only recourse is to hire an HVAC contractor to run new ducts using sheet metal. Although imperfect, might the use of ductboard, for instance, provide a tighter, cleaner solution to the current setup, or am I better off simply sealing the visible gaps and cracks with mastic or spray foam as best I'm able? It's been a real pleasure listening to you all during the past several months. Your good cheer and professionalism has been a welcome distraction. Sincerely, Matt. Thanks, Matt. You think he's talking about our show? Oh my God, pan ducts. I don't know how this was ever a good idea, or how everyone thought it was a good idea. And if you're not familiar with this method of running ductwork, and it's almost exclusively used for return air ducts, but you take the joist bay, so it has the two sides of the joist and then subfloor above, and on the bottom you nail up panels of sheet metal to the bottoms of the joists, and then these become your return air ducts. And as you might imagine, they're pulling your return air from all the cracks in the subfloor and all the mouse tunnels connecting to them. And they're notorious for poor performance and being unhealthy. And I think you got to rip them out and put real ductwork up there. I think fiberglass would be okay, but it's second best because it has a lot of friction that steel ductwork doesn't have. And, in most homes, the return air system is vastly undersized or under planned. And it just doesn't flow enough air, so you end up pulling, return air from the basement and other places where the ductwork is located, or in the attic. And all these places are not conditioned to the degree that the rest of the house is. So you're taking an efficiency hit, and you're bringing in air from unknown sources.
Is that something a DIYer could take on? That sounds like a big job, replacing those.
Running ductwork?
Yeah.
I love ductwork.
Yeah.
I start bleeding whenever I even look at this stuff.
It doesn't strike you as a bigger than a DIY project, no?
I don't know. I mean, it depends on the DIYer.
I suppose that's true. Yeah.
I don't know, Brian. What do you think? Is running ductwork hard?
I've never done any, so I can't comment on that.
What about just ripping out all these pan ducts? That seems like, I don't know. The visual that you gave seemed like it would be quite a job. It
is a job. And the difficulty is if you just pull this all down without replacing it, then all of the makeup or all the return air for the hot air furnace system is coming from the basement or wherever the return air trunk line is running. So it's an even worse scenario possibly. I think you need in many cases, we often advise folks to get a good HVAC contractor, and I still don't have a good answer on how to find one, but, you have to find someone who's familiar with building performance to, first off, assess your return air duct system and the supply and, make the changes that are necessary, and then figure out a way to improve the duct runs for your return air system, I would say.
Yeah, and likely, these ducts are going to be an improvement. Like you just said, Patrick, they're gonna reduce friction. A well-installed, duct is going to be a better system, and so it's probably going to improve the performance in general of your HVAC system. And like you just said, I don't know that it's hard to find a good HVAC. That it's hard to find good HVAC people. I think that the challenge is that there's really great installers out there, and there's really great designers out there, and often they're not the same people. And that's the challenge. Like, people who do really great installations, are maybe the same people that are like just, using rules of thumbs and oversizing their systems and taking that kind of approach. What they install might be really well installed, right? But you also, the design is an important part of HVAC work that's often just simply not done, right? A lot of homes just simply don't have a manual J done, or never mind, manual S and manual D. So I think there's great professionals out there, but making sure that that good design is part of it, and not only a new system, but when you're changing a system, right?
Now's the time to address any of those, problems with the system, and there might be things that that might be discovered in the process of checking out this system that are dangerous or need to be addressed for other reasons. Right. It's often the case. And the house is, of an era when we just didn't understand a lot of the issues that we do now. And I think it's worth having a look. This is from Jeremy. Hey, FHB crew, I am relatively new to the podcast, and I am burning through episodes. The info has been extremely helpful with our small remodeling/construction business. I tell customers and employees all the time that things are done incorrectly for two reasons: ignorance or laziness, or a combination of the two. Listening to the podcast reduces my amount of ignorance. I still have a long way to go. It provides lots of answers, but more importantly, it makes me aware of when I should be asking questions. In January, we're building a 2-story addition attached to a log cabin. What things should we be considering? Obviously, the addition will be much better insulated and more airtight. We're planning to put zip bar on the exterior for added R value and air sealing with fiberglass bats in the cavities. We're going to drywall the second floor ceiling before framing the partition walls. The ceiling will have blown cellulose. Does this increased tightness and insulation pose any problems with the existing cabin? Additionally, I understand roof venting is ineffective in most cases, but what about gable vents and powered vents? Are these effective? Lastly, I laugh when discussions of air sealing and blower door tests come up. At our house, ACH is an incalculable number. Instead, we use ACS, air changes per second. We have 5 young children, and air sealing goes something like this. Please shut the door. Please shut the door again. Please shut the door all the way. Just stay in or stay out. I'm going to lock you out of the house. What do you mean you left a window open so the bird could get out of the cold? And on. Jeremy. Yep. I think this is kind of scary. So I want to know first off how old the log cabin is, because we've talked about on the show before, log buildings shrink an awful lot. So if you have a new one and you're putting an addition up next to it, you're going to have to plan for that shrinkage. But if it's been up for a couple decades, I would worry less about that. I emailed Jeremy to ask him my questions, and I haven't heard back from him. But, that's the first thing is log buildings settle a lot. The logs shrink, and you need to build in huge air spaces above doors and windows, as an example, and make accommodations in masonry to allow the building to settle around these elements.
Wonder if that's why you don't see a lot of additions to log houses. I don't see very many.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I would see like all kinds of log structures with all kinds of wacky additions in the Adirondacks, but I think that's a special place because of the aesthetic traditions, and it's a poor place too, right? So people are building structures that they can afford, maybe over time.
Well, yeah, and hopefully if he's in an area with lots of log cabins, hopefully that means there's builders that are familiar with doing things like adding to them, and know how to do that well. That maybe that's wishful thinking, but that's what I hope. I don't think when it comes to the questions, I don't think that I can't think of any issues with the kind of stuff that that they mentioned doing in the existing house. It's related to their tightness. When we tighten up a house, in general, if you're tightening up a whole house, then yes, you have things that you need to think about, ventilation, makeup air, these types of things. But if this log cabin is really that leaky, then all this work that they're doing on this addition is just going to make the addition more comfortable, and probably none of those things are going to be a concern. I do want to make a comment about the roof venting. Roof venting is a debated issue. For sure, in its efficacy. However, done right and in most situations, I think soffit to ridge vents are more effective than gable vents, and so maybe roof venting isn't as effective at certain things as we'd all like it to be, and people claim it is, but there's a lot less problems with vented roofs than with roofs that are not vented in the long haul. And so I think it's always, if you have the ability to vent a roof, you have a soffit where you can simply have very simple soffit intakes, and you can have a ridge exhaust, then it's a good safe way to go. And attic vents, they're also highly debated topic, and from what I have read, and most of the people that I trust for information said powered attic vents, are
never
a good idea. So I think just do that soffit to ridge venting, do it right, and you likely have less problems with your roof than taking some other avenues.
I think what Jeremy was referring to is we've had a number of conversations that, just because you have a vented roof doesn't mean it vents effectively. Steeper roofs work better as vented assemblies. They're
roofs
often
south-facing roofs better than north-facing roofs. And
there are obviously things that are in the way. There's sometimes a problem like skylights or valleys.
Sure.
So just because you put vents in a roof doesn't mean it's going to work. And I totally agree with you, Brian. It's a more forgiving assembly than a unvented assembly. But just because we cut the holes doesn't mean that the smart arrows are telling the air to flow, right?
Well, It also depends on whether or not your attic is inside the conditioned envelope too, right? So you don't want gable vents if that be the case, right?
Right. Because then it would be a window that's open all the time.
Right.
And there would be no exhaust. Yeah, all true. And and one of the interesting things too, in that they're planning is an airtight ceiling, and often for that roof ending to work properly, the ceiling does kind of need to be airtight, right? Because otherwise you're pulling, stack effect is just pulling conditioned air from inside the house out through those ridge vents.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would tell Jeremy that I would tell anyone, and Brian just touched on it, make sure you have, good air barrier in the addition, and make sure you're sealing any connections to the existing structure, which could be different if it's logs, right? And you're going to have to figure out some way for the new walls to attach to the existing log walls. And, I've seen that done well, and I've seen it done very badly with what looks like cases of sealant to kind of fill the holes where that transition is. And as we've talked a lot on the show and other places, transitions are where things get complicated. Marrying this new stick frame structure to a log structure is going to be more difficult than marrying a stick frame structure to another stick frame structure, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff, what do you think about this?
Yeah, that's a really complicated connection between the log structure and the stick frame structure. I've seen connections between two log structures, and that's also extremely complicated.
What do you do?
Man, these log homes, they keep coming up.
Yeah, well, it involves cutting slots and having things that can slide so they can move independently but are still interlocked.
Yeah.
Yeah. It has to be engineered by somebody who understands it.
Yeah, I think Jeremy's asking all the right questions, right? And he's thinking about this, which is good. You don't want someone who's just going to launch into this project without thinking about how the things are going to join up together. I would find it more challenging with log walls to get new mechanicals into the new space, right? That's going to take some thinking if there's no basement or crawl space underneath, especially if it's the addition is going to have running water. If it's only, living space without sinks and toilets and what have you, I think that would be easier. But pipes are going to present some additional complications in getting those through the building. Do you see like these log structures in rural South Carolina, Brian?
No, not until you get up into North Carolina. That's where I start to, in my travels down in this area, that's where I start to see them. And interestingly, and I've noticed this in other parts of the country too. Interestingly, in mountain states,
Mm-hmm.
you start to see the log home companies on the sides of the highways.
Yeah.
And it like sort of like their way of advertising. And, so as soon as you drive up into North Carolina from South Carolina, straight shot on Route 26 from, Charleston up to Asheville, you start to see like 2 or 3 or 4 log home companies on the side of the highways. What we see in rural South Carolina is manufactured houses.
Yeah. And a lot of places,
lots of
right?
manufactured houses. Yeah.
Are they the, double single wide variety, or are these modulars with a little more complexity? Or is it vary?
Mostly the double single wide variety, which is fascinating when they're built in the low country and they're on piers 12 feet off the ground. And that's something that's happening now. So it's really interesting to see,
I would love to see them jack one of those things up to do that. How do they do that?
Yeah, I haven't seen it done, but I've seen them completed projects, but I've not seen one done. Imagine cribbing and jacks, just like jacking up a house.
Wow. It would seem scary to me to attach to masonry piers with something like as top heavy as a manufactured house. I got lots of questions.
I'll get you some photos next time I go by one project in particular that it looks like it's got to be 12, 14 feet off the ground.
And do they have like parking area under these things, or is it just like the yard?
Well, a lot of the more well-designed houses that are, in these areas, they need to be off the ground. do make good use of that space. They use it for parking, storage, outdoor spaces. I've seen some really nicely designed outdoor spaces that kind of like tuck under the house, but then extend out a little bit too. So I've seen it done really well. With the manufactured houses, it tends to just be
space,
just up there on some concrete blocks.
Yeah. Well, and it's cool. In this country, we have the luxury of being able to change our houses and improve them over time. Like, gosh, if you live in a decrepit mobile home and you put this brand new one up on pilings to make it more storm resistant, like, what a great thing, right? It's your life is so much better all of a sudden.
I've been wondering, and I'd love to hear if anyone listening has ever remodeled a manufactured house. I would love to hear some experiences on that. As I've been looking at property since I've been in this new area where there is so much manufactured housing in South Carolina and in North Carolina, there's so many beautiful properties that have manufactured houses on them. And I've never lived in one or worked on one, so I don't know what it would be like to remodel one, but
it's like camping. I've done it.
I tend to think it would be a fun project, but maybe I'm really misguided. So if anyone has...
It seems like you start tearing into it and want to replace just about everything, no?
Manufactured housing covers a broad spectrum of things.
True.
So the thing I lived in was a 1972 single wide, right? And in those days, they still left the tail lights on them, and it was a trailer, and that's what it was. And it was framed with 2x2s. And it's got steel siding on the exterior and paneling on the interior, so it doesn't have an air barrier to speak of, right? And it's got those, I know I always say it wrong, but jalousie windows, the kind that look like little awnings, and those are notoriously leaky too. The other place those are popular is in the Florida Keys. So my place was cold, but there are well-made ones by all accounts that have 2x6 construction and air barriers, and they're way better than they used to be.
It's interesting, Patrick, that you mentioned the fact that it's a trailer, because that's also a distinction in some areas. I'm not sure if this is true everywhere, but what I've noticed is that's an important distinction on how they're sold. And they're not a home, and they're not real estate if they're not on a permanent foundation. So otherwise they're personal property. So if you wanted to buy a manufactured house that was on let's say you found this great 1 acre property and it had manufactured house on it. And if they had put that on, if they had, installed footings and blocks and jacked it up and put it back down on the trailer can still be there. But if it's put back down on those blocks, basically it's anchored to the site. Now it's considered real estate, and you can get a mortgage for it and buy it as a house. But if it's just on the trailer, it's considered personal property. So really you're just buying a piece of personal property from someone, just like buying, a guitar from, on Craigslist.
Does that apply to tiny houses too? Same idea?
I would imagine so. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's been really nice talking to you all.
Likewise.
Well, unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks to Kiley.
Hey, Patrick.
What?
Tell the listeners to send you an email letting you know who they want to interview next year.
Oh, you're not going to believe me, but this is the first time I forgot. And I don't think that's true. As Brian pointed out, so as part of our 40th anniversary celebration of Fine Homebuilding, we're encouraging listeners to send us an email describing who they'd like to interview, one of our contributors or one of us, and we'll do our best to have you on the show. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Brian, was this your idea? It was, right?
It was, yeah. I'm really interested to see how this goes, but it does seem like a fun idea, and a way to get some guests on the podcast. And frankly, I'm just listen to the feedback that we had tonight or today on the show, right? We have such smart listeners.
Yeah, totally. We have really smart people listen to this show.
We've always known that about the people who read the magazine, and now we know it about the podcast listeners, really smart people, insightful. And so it'll be great to let some of them interview us or our contributors,
I agree. And, more than anything, the folks who listen to this show make it way better than it would be. With their good questions and their good feedback, We love it, and please keep it coming. And it makes the show better for everybody, believe me. Well, I mean it this time. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks to Kiley, Brian, and Jeff for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com, and please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Stay safe, everybody. Keep craft alive, and happy building.